So before we begin, I'm just going to start with a land acknowledgement. The Lethbridge Public Library acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of Black people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The city of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. So today we have Candas Dorsey, is the award-winning author of Black Wine, a paradigm of Earth Machine, Sept and Other Stories, Vanilla and Other Stories, Ice and Other Stories, and The Adventures of Isabel. She is a writer, editor, and former publisher, community advocate, and activist living in Edmonton, Alberta. We also have Robyn Harding joining us today. Robyn is the author of numerous books, including the international bestseller, The Party and The Swap, which was an instant #1 Globe and Mail and #1 Toronto Star bestseller. She has also written and executive produced an independent film. She lives in Vancouver with her family, and you can visit her at robynharding.com or follow her on Twitter and Instagram at rhardingwriter or Facebook at author Robyn Harding. And today she'll be talking about The Perfect Family. We also have Anna-Marie Sewell joining us. She's an award-winning multi-genre writer-producer whose career has centered around collaborative multidisciplinary work, including Ancestors and Elders, Reconciling Edmonton, which featured the first ever round dance at Edmonton City Hall, Braidings, Honor Songs, and The Heart of the Flower. As Edmonton's 4th poet laureate, Anna-Marie created and curated the Poem Capture public art installation. She founded and ran Big Sky Theatre, a 3-year training and performance project producing original Aboriginal theatre with urban youth. And she is also the founding member of the Stroll Poets, which has provided an entree into Edmonton's public poetry community since 1991. So thank you all for joining us today for our mystery panel. And so what we're gonna do is have each of the authors read a little bit from their work, and then please pop any questions that you have for them into the question answer, and we will answer them after everybody has read their little part. So is it okay if you go first, Candas?
It is. I'm just trying to switch over to my my file so that I can actually read. And my computer is saying, "What do you mean show only one page at a time?"
I can go like.
Yeah, do you want to go, Robyn? I think we lost Candas.
Okay, sure. So I'm going to read from my novel, The Perfect Family, that came out on August 10th. And it is the story, no great surprise, this family is far from perfect. They appear perfect on the outside. Mom and dad have good jobs. They have a beautiful restored home. Son goes to a prestigious college. Daughter's doing well in high school. And then one night out of the blue, their home is pelted with eggs, and these kind of mysterious assaults just escalate and become increasingly dangerous. And no one in the family will admit to having any idea of why these attacks are happening, but each member of the family has a very dark secret. And one of them is the cause of these assaults on their home. So I'm just going to read the prologue, which is just a couple of pages. I stood alone in the street, watching the silent house turn down for the night. One by one, the lights blinked out like stars dying in an inky sky. The upscale suburb was eerily quiet, no sound but my own breath, my own heartbeat. Still, I waited, and then I waited some more. The occupants had to be asleep, all of them. If someone heard me, if someone woke up, everything would be ruined. If I got caught, there would be serious consequences, violence, even jail. But I wasn't going to get caught. It was a beautiful house. Anyone would say that. It was craftsman style. They were everywhere in Portland. Older 2-story homes with covered front porches, chunky wood columns, big picture windows. This one had been renovated and updated. It wasn't huge or extravagant, but it was definitely expensive and well maintained. The yard was manicured to perfection, and you could probably eat off the paved driveway. Inside would be the same, an open floor plan with high-end furniture, valuable paintings, and designer knickknacks, all the shit that made a house appear elegant and refined. But the people who lived there only looked perfect. They had done horrible things. They kept horrible secrets. People like that made me sick. Fakes, phonies, pretending they were better than everyone else when they were rotten inside. Now they were stressed, panicked, falling apart. The thought made me smile. Pulling my hood over my head and drawing the strings tight, I moved down the driveway. My sneakers were nearly silent on the pavement, but the red plastic jug banged against my leg, so I held it aloft. The scent of gasoline was already strong in my nostrils. Good thing I'd thought to wear gloves. The smell would linger on my hands and give me away. I stepped onto the grass, cool and damp, and cut across the lawn to the side of the house. The camera over the door blinked at me, but I'd be nothing more than a dark blur on the screen. The family thought the surveillance would be a deterrent, but it wasn't. There's no way to identify me, no way to know who I was, just another faceless figure lurking in the night. At the side of the house, I squatted down, bouncing on my haunches. Adrenaline was coursing through me, my body vibrating with the need to enact my plan, but I forced myself to wait. And then I waited some more, to be safe and to build up my courage, because what I was about to do was serious. It could be fatal, but I couldn't back out now. I don't know how long I crouched in the dark, but my knees were getting stiff and my right leg was starting to fall asleep. It was time. Bursting out of the shadows, I scurried to the decorative hedge that ran along the front of the house. Removing the lid from the gas can, I dumped accelerant onto the shrubs, dousing the shiny green leaves with the toxic substance. A plant like this wouldn't burn easily, but the gas would erupt. It would burst into flames, fire skittering across the foliage. There was a chance the porch railing would catch fire, that it could climb the wooden posts and ignite the second story. If the smoke alarms didn't work, well, the world would be a better place without people like the Adlers. I lit the match and let it drop.
Wow, that was like the perfect suspenseful part to choose.
Thank you. It's always good to have a prologue.
Yeah. Anna Marie, would you like to go next? I think we're still trying to get Candas back.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm reading to you from my first novel, Humane, which was published by Stonehouse Publishing. Came out in November of 2020, and it's been having a wonderful year, and I've been having a wonderful year with it. It's a story that's got shape-shifting, murder, interdimensional travel, and other kinds of strange cultural shenanigans, but it's really just a story of a family just like mine, just like yours, could be anybody's family, living in a city that's more or less like Edmonton, but is called Amisquatchie. So we'll start at the beginning. Hazel, dog thief. So here I am with this damn dog. I mean, I literally got up in the morning, threw out my boyfriend, drove out to the Humane Society and stole a dog. What happens now? I ask him in my head. He gives me a slight grin, swipes his tongue along his teeth. Well, that depends on you. You ready to get to work? To work? I don't know what you mean. Weird skin crawl feeling snakes down my back. Oh, yes, I do believe you do. His eyes are orange, yellow, brown, and way too close. I shoulder check left away from the glare. This is freaking me out and I'm getting mad, but I've got nothing in the bag for this situation. I can only muster my teenager. Well, how can I know? Oh, you know. Spider laughs and it raises every hair on my body. I know. I reach for my Timmy's, playing for time, and just like that, he ducks his head to intercept the motion, grips my hand in his mouth. Hey, I jerk free. Cut it out, I'm driving here. He rolls an eye. Okay, then. I shake my head as if that's going to shut up the voice, his voice. I've got to pay attention to the road, Spider. Woof, he says in disgust, and curls against the bucket seat, turning his head toward the window. And shouldn't you be riding in the back, dog? He turns his head, curls one lip to show me the teeth.
A very big, very sharp teeth,
snickers the voice.
the teeth right up front, human.
I have to think for a moment, have to take this back. I am in the driver's seat here, am I not? For a moment, I see us as if I were the driver in the oncoming lane. Woman, enter over entitled dog. Well, don't shed all over the upholstery, I manage, and then I have to laugh. It's ridiculous.
What's funny?
I just stole a dog. I'm imagining what the police would say if they stopped me. Well, the dog told me to do it, officer. Well, I mean, first of all, my dead granny, told me to get the dog, and then the dog told me. I start laughing in a panicky way, and like that, Spider whips his head around and grabs my coat sleeve. Steady, he says in my head. And for the first time, there's a whiff of kindness. Some kind of tone I've only ever heard from Gran. And I guess from my dad. And suddenly I'm blinking the tears away. Look, I don't cry over Dad anymore. It's been way too long. And he never liked crying anyway. Hold your own counsel, he'd say. Low, controlled. The stuff he held in was too much and it got him in the end. But I shake my head. Focus on driving. Spider has had the decency to let go and look away. We roll through the rain-slick streets, the faint slap and squeak of the wipers on the Jeep's windshield, a slow counterpoint to all these things I have no idea how to say. But now he speaks up as a certain acridity invades my space.
Hey, crack the window, would you? The guy could use some air. It's the stuff they feed us there.
And there we were, heading home, like the first scene in some American cop buddy movie. You know, the part where the mismatched pair has that first glimmer of connection. Thanks.
Mhm.
Perfect. We don't seem to have Candas back quite yet. So we will start with some questions and then hopefully we will get her back soon. I'm just wondering if you guys could talk about sort of how you build, in particular, a mystery. You know, you've all these added elements, you know, a little bit different than fiction, right? You have this tense kind of feeling that you're trying to create, and you kind of want people to keep, you know, be on the end of the seat of their chair. And I'm just wondering if, you know, you could talk about how that changes your writing process and how, you know, you build that sort of mystery world and that suspense element.
I'll start, Anna, if that's okay with you. Yeah, so for me, I used to write comedy. I used to write humor years ago. My first novel I published in 2004, and it was called The Journal of Mortifying Moments. So clearly not a mystery or thriller. And I switched genres when my first domestic drama came out in 2017, The Party. And prior to that, I had been doing a lot of screenwriting work, and that has helped me so much in pacing and maintaining mystery and tension, I think, because there's a really strict structure that goes along with screenwriting. And they say that, you know, it's sort of inherent in all of us, this structure of story that we've been listening to from the beginning of time. And it's a 3-act structure, and certain things happen at certain times. And the audience or the reader is really expecting that kind of momentum. And so by following that sort of just roughly, just like the big plot points, I always kind of lay out those big plot points and then I write toward them. So making sure that lots of little things happen in between, but that those big turning points for the story happen kind of on a schedule. So I have found that super helpful for me with writing thrillers.
Well, as for me, Humane is my first novel, and so my first thriller. But from a background of poetry and theater, what has been helpful to me is that if you're being a poet, it's like being a sumo wrestler, which is my favorite sport to watch. You have to get in, be quick, have balance, and hit hard. And then don't waste words. So when I sat down to write a novel, I thought, well, I know kind of how it goes, as you were saying, Robyn, all the plot points. I know what I want to have happen in this story. but I've never sat down and wrote anything full length before. Why don't I write it as if I were writing poetry? I'll just write the pictures that I understand, and then I'll put them into order afterwards. And it allowed for a lot of surprise for myself, because although I had a notion of how the general story went, there were certainly elements that I didn't know that I knew about. And so I tried to put those in so that the reader would have that same experience of, you might not have thought this is where this is going. Now it's going to turn over here, always steering towards the same thing. And I think theater counts on that too. Yep, there's the rule of three. There's 3 times you see a thing, but it's when you see it that makes it more thrilling. And it's what it turns out to be. You may think that the thing you'll see 3 times is one particular thing, but it could be something else. And I just like to leave that room for the element of surprise for myself as a writer. And absolutely, it makes it the most fun I've had yet. And I like to have a lot of fun writing, whether it's poetry or theater or songs or essays or this book.
I'm also wondering if you could maybe talk about, in your writing process, I'm going to out myself here. When I read mysteries, I read the end first. Just because I know.
No.
Sorry. When I tell people that, I know. Shocked, I know. But I'm wondering if you could talk about, like, do you have an idea when you first start of how you want the ending to sort of be and how it kind of wraps up, or does it kind of change as you're writing? I just wondered what that process kind of looked like.
For me, again, speaking solely to this one book, I knew there were certain things that happened at the end. I knew where the end happened. I knew something that had to happen to make the whole thing. Kind of wrote the end first, and then left in flex room for things that developed along the way that made it a little bit different than I first saw. But yeah, I know what's going to happen, sort of. How about you, Robyn?
Yeah, I do. Sometimes I feel like there's really only one way the book can end. It's how we get there that will change. So I usually know who's going to be dead, or, like who's going to commit a crime but sometimes it will switch. So I will sometimes write a whole novel thinking, oh, so-and-so is the villain here and they did X, Y, Z. And then I'll go, no, and I'll switch it. And then you do have to go back in and plant different seeds. But I think if you drag the readers along in your writing with you thinking as the author, oh, this is the baddie, then you can shift some of the suspicion. So yeah, but often I would say I do know the ending.
Another thing was, in mysteries in particular, the character is so important, various characters, right? Because like you said, you're kind of putting the different points where you're kind of putting that doubt in people's mind, like, oh, this could be the person, this might not be the person, like adding that suspense. So I'm just wondering if you both could talk maybe about how you develop your characters when you're writing.
So I don't know if you did this in theater, Anna Marie, but when I was doing screenwriting, I wrote profiles because, you don't have the ability to be inside a character's head in a play or a screenplay. So it's so much subtext and so much, it's all just dialogue. And so we really, really need to understand them. And so I do that now as a habit at the beginning of a novel. I write character profiles, and then I write my kind of little screenwriting structure, my sort of tentpole set pieces or what have you, plot points, I would call them. And then when you drag them through this horrible mess that you're writing, you really know them. You really know how they're going to react. And it feels, I think, hopefully more natural. So I think those profiles are really helpful for any type of fiction, probably.
It could be. I can't say I necessarily did that, but certainly with certain characters, I knew things about them and a lot of things about them. Other characters were a surprise to me when they revealed what their connection to the rest of the story was. And I thought, well, is that going to work? But as soon as you think, is that going to work? You know, it
Right.
came to you for a reason. And of course it's going to work. And then you just make that connection work out. And it is very much like the process of theater, where the dialogue has to come out of a whole lot of thinking about why would they say that? So
Right.
definitely there's a lot that you don't see on the page, but if you've done the homework behind it, then what appears on the page makes sense to the reader, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can just say, I've been doing a lot of events with my book just coming out recently, and it's so interesting to talk to other writers and what their process is. And I've just done a couple of events with like really big, successful mystery writers who just wing it completely. You know, they just sit down, and you said that you do some of that, Anna Marie, with certain characters, but they're like, they have no idea where it's going, who did it, who everyone is. And I just think that's like quite a gift.
Well, who knows? Maybe the story just does write itself.
Yeah.
Who can say?
So we have a question that somebody had asked. Somebody was wondering if you have sort of a favorite part about writing your books.
Gosh. For me, I think my favorite part is, and this is true for poetry books as well as for other books, the moment when you know you're on a roll. The first book I wrote or put together really was my first collection of poetry. And my kid was tiny at the time, so I would get up at 5 a.m. and write. And when she was a little older and began writing herself, she said, "How do you write a book?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I got up at 5 a.m. She started getting up at 5 a.m. and she wrote a book, and I went, gosh, that's interesting. And I realized that it really is a great process, but you kind of have to drive yourself to the page. And it's that time in the morning when I know I don't have to drive myself to the page anymore. I'm just excited to get there and see what's going to turn up this morning.
Yeah, I would say very similar. I'm a morning writer too, not 5, but like 7. And I just get up and I grab a cup of coffee and I sit down, and my brain is fresh. My creativity is at its peak. Sometimes I'll read what I wrote yesterday, and, you know, by the end of the day, I'm really struggling. You know, other thoughts have come into your head. Your day's getting busy. You might have to do other chores or errands or, you know, marketing type, business type stuff. And I'll go through and reread what I wrote, and I'm like, oh, it's not so bad after all. And I can, you know, really, I always have more clarity in the morning and I can fix it. And so, yeah, that's my favorite time, that first few moments when I sit down at the computer, the first couple hours. And then it just is like by about 11 o'clock, it's like, I'm starting to get, my shoulders hurt and my arms hurt, and I'm hungry, and I'm like struggling. What word is that again? You know, but those first few hours are great.
Well, that's all I ever write in a day. I'm lazy.
Oh, well.
I set myself a limit. I'm like, bang out the words and get on with the day, because there's always other things I have to do. So that's it.
Right.
It kind of, for me, that works to say you only get so many words today. And if you find yourself running over, you have to go, now wrap it up, leave it till tomorrow. And that kind of works.
That's great. And that's what I used to do when my kids were younger. But now, honestly, I don't really have anything else to do. So I just keep writing. Like, I could clean, but I'd rather write, or I could, you know, I walk my dogs. I have a few things, but I just seem like I spend a lot more hours now that my kids are both out of the house, and just go get some groceries, I guess.
Yeah.
Probably the pandemic helped with that as well, I'm sure. All this extra writing time.
Well, it's true. And then also now my husband works from home, and my daughter was doing university from home. She's since gone back, but I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave my office for like a year because there was someone working in every other space in my house. So maybe that's when I got into the habit of just spending more hours, because there was really nowhere else to go except outside.
Yeah, I envy your discipline. I've got a limited attention, probably why I did poetry for so long, limited attention span for the page.
Right.
And then I have to go do other things, which just lets the squirrels in the back of the head write tomorrow's work. Is the
No,
way
I think it's good. I think that you've got the right idea.
many ways in, right?
What's that? There's so many, yeah.
ways in. That's probably why you have a lot more books.
So Candace has joined us. Sorry, Candace. Are you all good?
I'm all good, I hope,
Okay.
but I had the blue screen of death, so it was like
Oh no.
the
I've had that
whole
happen.
shebang.
Yeah.
So,
Would you like
sorry.
to share with us your reading? And then I have a question that somebody wanted to make sure all three of you answered, so I was keeping that one.
Okay. All right. I'm going to read the beginning of the book that's going to look like this. This is actually my first book wrapped in the printout of the cover, but What's the Matter with Mary Jane is coming out next month. And it's the second in the series with Nameless Detective. And each book, the overarching titles are all from a nursery rhyme or children's rhyme. So this one is What's the Matter with Mary Jane by A.A. Milne. My parents used to torment me with when I was a kid by saying, what's the matter with Candace Jane? And I would say, nothing. So, so this is just the beginning. I made a mistake and I made the epigraph Bede's Death Song, which is in like ancient Old English or middle something English. And so I just was dealing with the people who are making the audiobook, and they can't read it in the original language either. So I'm not going to read it. But in any case, we're right at the beginning here. Once upon a time when the world was young. During our second year of university, Priscilla Jane Gill's cat Micah died, and she had him taxidermied. We all thought this was gross, but she said he was the truest being she'd met up to that point. She said that when she was with Micah, she had been able to tune into a special place, in touch with a purity to which she could only aspire, and that reaching for such purity gave her life a through line of calm. She wanted to recall that clarity every day, and she thought she would do so when she looked at his effigy, posed in a lifelike facsimile of his favorite meatloaf lounging position. In those days, this sort of explanation made sense. Besides, Priscilla was a folklore major. They were all a bit like that anyway. I think all of us saw Priscilla a little like she saw Micah when he was alive, of course. To us, she was a symbol of a time out of time, a pure zone between childhood and real life, where we could dream of a perfection for which we would not even remember to try once we put our college days behind us. But Pris didn't distinguish between college life and reality, and that set her apart. Maybe she was an early adopter of adulthood, or maybe she was a pure idealist. Either would have made her a wonder to us. We loved her evolved nature. She was an exotic, but she was our exotic. And long after we graduated, her image stayed with us, delicately poised in our history, perfect and without entropy, like a saint, or like Micah. We got used to Micah's ghost, as we called him, after a while, and some of us also were able to take Pris for granted now and again, until she breezed out of our lives on graduation day, wearing not much of anything under her graduation gown, and became one of our memories of university life, preserved in the amber of time, which is to say, idealized and almost forgotten. None of us had seen her since, but any time any of us encountered each other, sometime in the conversation we were bound to mention Pris and smile and shake our heads at our inability to match her grace and aestheticism. The woman at my door on that cold October day was tall, aesthetic, and stylish, with a gray brush cut and the hollow, perfect cheekbones of a clothing retailer's anorexic display figure. When I opened my door, she was looking away down the corridor, and I saw her strong raptor profile with a mysterious thrill of buried familiarity. thought I heard someone. Never mind, the woman said, turned her gaze back to me and smiled. Then I truly recognized her, that crooked supermodel smile with the trickster underlay. Priscilla Jane, I said, with that tone of satisfied arrival with which we greet the inevitable return of unfinished business. I just want to read one more little section. During this section, Priscilla asks our nameless protagonist for help solving a problem, and the protagonist initially refuses. And Priscilla makes friends with the cat, Bunnywit. Now, if we remember from book 1, Bunnywit used to be called Buckwit until the narrator realized that when certain people came to visit, like her born-again cousin Velma, that was perhaps not the politest name. So renamed the cat. And Bunnywit in this book takes the role of either the Greek chorus or Cassandra. I'm not sure which in any case. So that's the first section of chapter 1, and this is the last section, which is called Just Say Now. Just then a ping pong ball caromed into the kitchen, Bunnywit galloping after it. On his way past me, he stuck out a paw with full claw deployment and sliced at my leg, getting me right through the blue jeans. It felt as if he drew blood, and this I later confirmed. 4 cautionary little slices, an inch long, surface really, just enough to remind me that I am not 10 feet tall and bulletproof. If he could talk, I'm sure he'd have said, "Girlfriend, what are you thinking? No, she's lovely and she smells deliciously of a long dead cat, but send her away now." He did say a sharp no, though with his accent it came out meow. I should have taken his advice.
Perfect. Thank you, Candace. So somebody has left a question for all 3 of you. They say they are curious about location. One book is based in Portland, one in a fictional place that was described as similar to Edmonton, and I believe The Adventures of Isabel are in Edmonton. Though I could be
They're in a nameless city that resembles Edmonton more than it resembles any other city.
So they'd love to know how each author decides where to base their writing, and specifically whether to distinguish it as explicitly Canadian or not.
I can speak to that since mine is set in a US city, and my book deal is with Simon & Schuster in New York, and I have asked more than once my editor if I could set my books in Canada, and she has told me no. She thinks that, and I don't believe this is true personally, but she believes that a US audience will not respond as well to a Canadian setting, which I don't know why. But it's interesting. A lot of the books that I write, they're all fairly urban locales, and sometimes they don't work as well in a Canadian city. You know, there was some of them, Vancouver's the only Canadian city that I have lived in for any amount of time. I did live in Calgary for 5 years, but they're small. Vancouver's very small. Like, you kind of know everything about everybody. It would be hard to get away with some of the things that people get away with in my books. So the closest I have come was in my novel, The Swap. It's set on a fictitious island that is never specifically said whether it is a Canadian Gulf island or a US San Juan island. And the characters some of them are Canadians and some of them are Americans. And in my head, it's kind of a cross between Salt Spring and Galliano. And, so it's a Canadian setting without overtly saying that it's a Canadian setting.
Yeah. I find that I can't move the books out of Canada. And some of the reasons are really practical, writerly reasons, if you will. And I've already had this interesting conversation because Americans who read these books, accuse me of being soft on the police, for instance. And I have another book that's coming out next month as well. It's a young adult. and it has various racialized people in touch with the healthcare system, and I had a U.S. sensitivity reader read it, and they were saying, well, no person like this would ever trust healthcare because this, and all these things were U.S. culture reasons. And I just, when I'm writing, I'm not ready to put my head into a culture that, despite our supposedly common language and experiences, we really don't know. I haven't grown up with the kind of cultural surrounding or race relations or systemic relations. I've grown up with universal health care. When my characters get sick, they go to the hospital. They don't think about whether they've got insurance. And a substantial number of them still call the police, even though we have had in Canada certainly our issues with police brutality and police racial profiling and so on. But there's a completely different way of looking at law and order. So when crime occurs here, I think it occurs in enough of a different environment that I don't feel like I could just transplant that environment and give it US names. My people are really, really rooted in their culture and their place. And I have brought some of my favorite bits of some other cities and stuck them into the city that I write in. But, still when it comes time to look at what's the role of the medical examiner's investigator, that's a very Alberta thing, because we have a medical examiner and BC has a coroner, for instance. So I just decided, okay, we're going to be here, and let those who read it from elsewhere think of it as an exotic location. That's my workaround. It's exotic. Great, you're in this Canadian city. I don't know what that's like. Let's read the book. And it's certainly working in England, because the first book has just come out there in August, and there was more buzz than I expected, to be honest. Makes me feel very good about all this stuff. And good reviews. And I don't think there was one single review that said, oh, this is weird and Canadian. It was just like, here's this sassy mystery come out that is very queer, positive, and so on and so forth. So maybe it's just ego, but I figure I put it where it has to live, and the publishing world can deal with it. I'm too old. Let them deal with it. I'm too old to as the twig is bent, so grows the tree. And I was bent during a period of great Canadian literary nationalism, if you will.
Yeah, and for my part, the story happens in Amisquatchie because it happens in Amisquatchie. And Amisquatchie is Edmonton, and it isn't Edmonton. It's a time alongside our time. It's looking at the trends that are now happening in the world politic and saying, well, if this, then that. And what I saw the place as enabling me to do would be to take a walk through streets that we might know with people that you might not understand. They're all around you all the time. And definitely because they're Indigenous people, because they're mixed Indigenous people, because they're Canadian, and the history of how we live that out is different here than anywhere else in the world. It's a story of here. Now, it's a story of a globalized here as well, because I think that particularly because the second you say, oh, it's an Indigenous story, I've gotten for years people wondering, how are you doing with that white man's burden? That's the only thing we're meant to be writing about. But it's not about that. It's about bigger and yet smaller and more general and more specific issues than that. And it includes people who realistically live in Amisquatchie and in Edmonton. People from all corners of the world have lived in this city for generations now. So we don't, when we live an Indigenous life, believe it or not, spend all day long wondering how we're getting along with white people, or, are we caught between two worlds? As one reviewer said, is it about people caught between two worlds? No, it's about people who have agency, who happen to be of this background, who relate to the world that they live in from that background, just like any person walking down the street. But that street is in Edmonton, and it's in Amisquatchie, which is Edmonton that could be. But I wanted it to be an Edmonton you might recognize if you live in Edmonton, and an Edmonton you'd want to come visit if you didn't live here. So yeah, place is huge because it's fun. And there aren't a lot of stories. There's a few, but there aren't enough. I thought there was space for stories here.
I love what you said about people who are not coping with the kind of narrow ribbon of expected issues. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. But just living lives full of agency and so on, because I think that's where my people are too. It's like, you know, we can't be constantly trapped in that moment of coming out as whatever person we are in our culture. That happened, you know, a long time ago for most of us. And even though that process is continual, because you're continually having to face who you are, who you identify as, it's not front and center of people's lives all the time. You know, so people have also remarked in reviews that my queer characters don't seem to spend a lot of time worrying about it. Well, duh, you know, I mean, this is your life. It's what you do. It's who you are. Is it necessary to live in that initializing moment of complete angst for your whole life, like the eternal now of your worst miserable moment when you realized how you were going to have to relate to society? No, absolutely not. That changes from moment to moment, and most of us let the biggest part of our angst go when we trade it for agency.
Yeah, and then it allows for stories that are really just, you know, they can surprise you. They can go all kinds of directions, and that's what we're here for, right? We're suspense writers. We're mystery writers. We're writing interesting things that you didn't think might happen, but they're happening.
Yeah, that's right.
So we have time for one last quick question, and it was just that people were wondering what each of you is currently working on, what we can expect in the next little while.
I'll go first there. I'm working, as always, on a variety of projects. Some of them I can't talk about, but they've got me totally excited, and soon I'll be able to say some things I'm working on. But the things I'm working on that I'm very excited about are, of course, a follow-up to Humane. Working on that. I'm working on a new collection of poetry to do with, let's just say, the mystic underpinnings of the world and what poetry isn't about that. And I'm working on some choral works. I've been working with a composer for the last couple of years, and we've had a couple of pieces come out, and we're working on some new collaborations, and that just turns my crank entirely. Plus, there's a little children's theater piece that I'm working on with company here in town, whose name is Company, wherein I'm writing the part of a gopher advising a hamster about how to do a land acknowledgement. So there you go. There's a few things.
That's awesome.
I gotta say, you know, anyone who doesn't know Anna Marie's work, you've gotta get to know it. I think, Anna Marie, you are one of the most creative and original people working in our landscape today, and just hearing you make that list it's so exciting. And I've heard some of the stuff you've done with, if not the same composer, another composer. It's brilliant. It's truly brilliant. Here's you know, I'm just giving you a commercial for you, but you deserve it, because
you're sweet.
Think, well,
it means a lot coming from you, because you are an awesome inspiration to every Edmonton writer. Let's not leave Robyn out of this love fest, though.
Yeah. Well,
no,
okay,
it's good.
I'm gonna give a quick list and then turn it over to Robyn. So I'm working on book 3, which is darker and resolves some of the issues in book 2 and is kind of surprising me with things that are coming up. I've also got a book coming out in October from Inanna Press, which is called The Story of My Life Ongoing by C.S. Cobb. And it's a book from the point of view of an intersex teen. which I wrote in about 2006 and 7, but took this long to sort of find a home. I was too far ahead of my time for it to catch at that time. And it should have really, because now it's much more common. So I've had to actually have it be a historical novel, a 14 years ago novel. But just to echo Anna Marie, I've just put in an application for some funding to work on an opera with a composer in Toronto on a forensic pathology kind of story. Human remains are found. The scientists work to identify the person and how they died, and potentially they died by homicide, and to identify the killer. And as they do so, the person, we hear the person's voice, just little notes here and there, spattering the air. We don't even know what it is. And gradually, as they put together the identity, the person can move forward. And at the end, they can sing their story. And so that's been a thing that's been with me for about 25 years. And I finally have had sort of the leisure and opportunity to think about doing it. So that's what I'm up to.
Wow. I feel like a real slacker compared to you two. And I'm the one that spends 7 hours in her office, and I'm only just writing one book. Yeah, so I'm writing another thriller. It is also set in the US, but it's super helpful in this case because the character is a woman who had her own restaurant, and she lost it during the pandemic and ended up basically losing her entire home and is living in her car, which I realized if I had said that here, there would have been support and help and serve and, so anyway, she's sleeping in her car. She feels very vulnerable as a woman alone in such a place. So she is parking her car in a very upscale enclave near the ocean in Seattle. And one morning she hears one of these wealthy women has come down to the beach and is attempting to drown herself. And the woman in the car intervenes, and this unlikely friendship forms, and all is not as it seems though. And yeah, that's where I'm at. Wow, no operas and no composing. Gotta step out of my comfort zone.
There's like a huge variety in there.
You're young yet. You just wait. Time will pass, and all of a sudden, something will occur to you that is just so weird that you resist it. No, I must not do that. Oh, wait, maybe. Oh, okay. Well, all right then.
I haven't yet met that thing, Candace.
But you never say no to anything. That's true.
Nope. Do them all as much as I can, unless I run out of time. And now that I'm middle-aged, I'm like, sometimes this year I've had to say, actually, I don't have time to do that, because sometimes I really actually have to sleep. Getting a little bit needy.
Thank you all for joining us today. We're all out of time, so I appreciate everybody joining us for this year's, still unfortunately online Word on the Street, but we're glad that everybody could attend, and I really appreciate you three. All the responses were so wonderful, and everybody should go out and read right away and read what's coming up as well. So I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and thank you once again.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you all.
Bye, everyone.
Wonderful spending time with you all. Keep the word on the street, folks.
Likewise, and I'm really gonna look up Robyn's work, because I'm looking forward to discovering.
Oh, thank you very much.
Discovering it. Yeah.
Take care. I'll look
for inviting us all.
Cheers,
Bye.
everyone.